Hi there, and welcome to the USS Orleck. Would you tell me your full name and where you're from?
My name is James D. Sanford, and I live in LaPorte, Texas at this time.
I understand that you helped build this ship.
Yes, sir. I worked on it about 4 years.
What years do you remember?
From 42 to 46.
Were you there as when it was launched?
Yeah.
What type of work did you do helping to build it?
Well, at first I was a special apprentice ship fitter when I first hired in. And then I put my application in to be a hull inspector, and I had to finish 3 blueprint courses. After I finished them, well, I turned them in, but I didn't hear from them for some time. So I kept on ship fitting, and then they needed some more people in the layout. So they transferred me to the layout department. I worked there about a couple of years, and then they needed somebody to work with the coordinators. And the coordinators do the same thing the hull inspecting department does. They came and contacted me about being a coordinator. He said they looked up my records and they found out that I had finished 3 blueprint courses and asked me could I read blueprints. I said yes, so I can read them. He said we need somebody to work with us. He said you had your application in to be a hull inspector, but he said we do the same thing as a coordinator. He said would you like to work with us? Your application will eventually go through and you'll be classified as a hull inspector, but we need somebody now. I said well that's fine, I'll go work for you. So I did. So I worked with the coordinators for a pretty good while, and finally my application went through and they transferred me from coordinators to the hull inspecting department, but it was the same thing. So I worked with them till we finished up the ship.
So did you live in Orange when you worked on the ship?
Yeah, I lived in Orange 4 years.
Where are you from originally?
I'm originally from Sanford, Texas.
You say you come to the ship every year on your birthday or around your birthday?
Yeah, I have the last 3 or 4 years we come down here. My job was to inspect each compartment, and then we sold each compartment to the Navy when we saw that everything was okay. One day I went down in the double bottom to get some drain holes burned. Had to burn drain holes in certain places of the curvature of the ship where the stiffness came down. They had lady burners, and then they had lady welders, and there's a lot of women work here. So I took a lady down there to do the burning, and I told her to let me know when she got through, I'd be up on the deck. I waited a while, and after a while I saw her coming out of the deck, out of the hole there, you know, and she glanced over at me and then took off the other way. I thought, well, what's going on here? So I better go down there and see what she done. So I went down in there and got into the double bottom compartment, and a stream of water hit me in the face. I said, oh my gosh, she done burned a hole in this ship. Anyway, I went to the inspector's department up there, the shipfitters department, and told him. He got excited about it. We went back down in there to see what was going on, and the stream of water hit him in the face. So, oh my gosh, he said. He went up there and got several crowds, the caulkers, the burners, the welders, whatever he could find to go down there and stop it. So they went in there and worked on it, and they finally got it stopped. They got it finished and it was okay. And then one time I was inspecting a compartment and found out there's a whole bulkhead missing. I had 2 co-workers I was working with. I told them, I said, there's a bulkhead missing in this compartment. I said, a bulkhead missing? Yeah. They can't get no bulkhead down in here. I said, well, it's missing. They said, we better make sure about this. So we looked at the blueprint. They couldn't hardly read the blueprints because they hadn't took any courses, but I had. And I showed them where the bulkhead's supposed to be. And they said, well, okay. So I said, you better go tell the superintendent. So I went to his office. I told him about it. He didn't hardly believe it. And I said, well, come look on my blueprint. Looked on the blueprint, and he looked at it real close and said, yeah, there's supposed to be a bulkhead there. I said, well, it ain't one there. Oh, my gosh. He said, what we going to do? I said, I'll tell you, the only thing you can do is get a bulkhead in there is to go ahead and build one, have a burner to cut it in strips big enough to fit in the holes, and then take it down in there and re-weld it, and then grind it off real smooth. I said, that's the only way you can do it. Well, I guess it is, he said. So that's what they did. And they did a good job on it. And when I took the naval officer in there, I was sort of afraid that he might notice it and ask questions about it. But he looked at it and he didn't say nothing. So then he went ahead and passed it. Things like that came up, you know.
Where was that particular bulkhead? Do you remember?
I believe it was in the compartment where the oil is. It's a flush bulkhead. It keeps the oil from sloshing too much when the ship wavers, you know. That's where it was. It's got holes in it. You know, the bulkhead had holes in it, but that's so the oil could go a little bit up and go through, and somehow or another it keeps it from flushing from one side to the other. Too bad.
Do you have any idea how many different ships you worked on?
I think I worked on about 8 or 10 of them.
How many ships did the Orange shipyards build during the war?
I was told that we built 250 ships in 4 years. Well, destroyers, destroyer escorts, LCIs, WDTs, landing barges, and there's another one, I can't think of the number of it. Built all of them here.
Now, were they building ships before the war?
Not before the war. We didn't have nothing to fight with hard before the war. No planes or nothing. It had little cub planes. But once they bombed Pearl Harbor, that started it. I mean, everything went to building planes, tanks, ships, everything. They had to because Germany and Japan was in war with them all of a sudden. And we wasn't prepared. And Roosevelt tried to get them started to building war equipment, but they wouldn't do it. And they didn't get started till they bombed Pearl Harbor. And then when they bombed Pearl Harbor, it started. You didn't have no trouble getting it started then. They did a lot of work to get all them planes and ships and tanks and everything built. But they did it somehow. I don't know how they did.
Have you been to the World War II Museum in New Orleans?
No.
It would be really fascinating if you could go. It started off as the D-Day Museum, and it's now developed into the World War II Museum. Mm-hmm. And it's very, very fascinating. And they have a lot on the Higgins boat that was built, and just a lot on the war and both the European theater and the Pacific theater home effort of building planes and ships and so forth. And I think that you'd find it really, really fascinating.
You know, there was a general after the war talking to a Japanese general. United States general asked the Japanese general, he said, well, when y'all burned Pearl Harbor, he said, why didn't you come on over here and take us over? He said, you could have, we wasn't prepared. And he said, well, I'll tell you the main reason we didn't, because we knew quite a bit about your country. We decided that it might be too risky because we found out that about 85 or 90% of the people over had guns. And he said, we were afraid that we'd get into a big battle and lose on account of that. So that's the reason they didn't come on over.
Now, do you know, have you kept in touch with anybody else who worked on the ship?
Well, no, not. Well, I know a lot of people from up there worked on the ship, but of course they're not here anymore.
You were there the day that the ship was launched down the skids?
Mm-hmm. So, one thing about that, it cost quite a bit to put the grease on them launching pads to launch them with. So somebody come up with a bright idea to put banana peelings on there. So they had everybody saving banana peelings. So they put banana peelings on there, and they launched the ship with the banana peelings. And
must have taken a lot of banana peelings.
Oh yeah.
So how often did they launch a ship?
It's pretty often. They launched them seemed like it was once a week.
Now, looking across the wardroom table, the photographs, you see Mrs. Orlick there launching a ship. Do you recall seeing any of that?
Yeah, I remember when they launched it, they hit it with a champagne bottle. It was a big deal back then.
That's Mrs. Orlick. I believe her first name was Gerda, and of course that's Joseph Orlick.
You remember the number of each type that you made there at the shipyards?
There was a lot of them. I think a lot of them was in the D-Day battle. A lot of them got sunk, I think. USS ORLECK was the only one that ever came back to Orange. Out of how many was it, 18 or 20 destroyers?
I think 18 operated.
18 of them. It's the only one that ever came back. In fact, it's the only one of any of them came back. Well, I'm glad they got this one back, or I wouldn't have had one to come and roam on. Reminisce. Really a pleasure to come.
So you said you worked on pre-assembly?
Yeah, I worked on pre-assembly. While I was working on pre-assembly, they built a lot of these cabins on the pre-assembly and then took them all and set them on the ship. Well, that was interesting. I helped them build them. I worked at several different departments. I'd get sort of aggravated sometimes watching them trying to figure out different things about the compartments. Of course, then everything was sort of new, and they was trying to figure out how to do everything. And I asked the superintendent one day, I said, why are y'all so slow? We need to get all this stuff built. We need these ships over there. Well, we've got to get it right, he said. I said, well, oh, yeah, that's right. You got to get it right. One name was named Bill Steinbeck. He was superintendent of the pre-assembly. He was a very intelligent person and a very sincere person. Always done the best, trying to get everything going as fast as they could. I remember one time I was on days and needed some people on nights. When I was on days, I'd watch them people coming in. See, it was a 24-hour deal. Had a day crew and a night crew. I figured I wouldn't like working nights, but I figured that one day he might mention it to me. Sure enough, one day on the slab there, he came up to me and he said, how would you like to work nights? I said, well, I don't know. To tell you the truth, I'd rather work days if I could. He said, well, let me tell you, we've got boys over there, thousands of them are dying. They're fighting for us. He said, we need to do everything we can here, regardless of what it is, to get these ships to them. I said, well, okay, in that case, I'll work nights. I said, does it help out? Yeah, so I went nights. And after I started working nights, I liked nights better than did days. I'd go to work 5:30 and get off at 4, come home, take a shower, and sleep till about 10. Then I had the rest of the day to do what I wanted to do. Didn't have to go back to work till 5:30. I think we was working 10 hours a day then, 6 days a week.
What was the pay back then?
Well, if you hired in as a helper, you only got 54 cents an hour, and you didn't get a raise. But if you took a blueprint course or two and passed the test and hired in as a special apprentice ship fitter, you got 66 cents an hour, and you get a raise every 4 months. So that's what I did. I took blueprint courses before I came down to Orange, then hired in as a special apprentice, and I got 66 cents an hour. Back then, it was good pay because I was only making 50 cents a day then. And there was thousands and thousands of farmers left the farms and come down and went to work in the shipyard.
Now, I've seen these like a generic destroyer, like a print, that was put in a frame, actually looked like a tray with emblems on it for every quarter.
James has one of those.
What do you call those?
Well, what we did, we had what we call a mold off. They had plates in there made out of wood.
Oh, okay.
And they had them to fit the curvature of the ship, the wood plates that would make curved, and in pieces so you could carry it. And they had a big building that they kept all that in. You had to go down there and check all that stuff out. When I was working on a slab, you had to check all that stuff out, and when I was in a layout, we'd lay them things down. The curvature of the ship would take a scribe and we'd scribe around it. And then we had to take a punch and punch holes all the way around so the burner couldn't see the scribes, but he could see the punch holes. And that way he could burn the curvature of the ship. I got a picture of the destroyer, and it had stamps on there, how many months. Each one was 4 months. And I think it was enough for over 3 years stamps on there. But when I bought it, I hadn't finished working the shipyard yet, so it wasn't all the stamps on there.
So you had to buy it?
Yeah. They had to figure out a fast way to build ships. And they got together and figured it all out. That's where they come up with the idea of making these wooden plates that sit on the ship and scribe around it, a quick way of doing it. But it's a good way, too. They figured all that out.
Yeah, like a template or a jig?
So it worked real well. But you had to be real careful when you was measuring and get it right. Out of all the layout I did there, over a couple of years of just layout, I made one mistake. My superintendent later on, he told me, he said, come along and show you something. So I went on one of the landing barges. He said, you made one mistake, but said they corrected it. It wasn't nothing important. When you're measuring out the molds, he said, the helper could have got it off an inch or two or something like that. He said, that's what happened. He said, but it wasn't no big deal. They compromised and made it okay. On the edge of the deck, it was about 2 inches short. So what they did, they got a big L frame that lapped over it and just went ahead and welded over that and corrected it. And that's the only mistake I ever made, luckily. But you had to be real careful when laying it out, want to get it right. Instead of going 3 hours a day, we'd go 6 hours a day. It doubled up on the time so we could go down and go to work earlier. We went and finished a 6-week course in 3 weeks by going 6 hours a day. It was me and Clarence Ford, Sanford, and a friend of his rode with J.D. Britton and his wife down. J.D. went to the school. I rode with him over to Nacogdoches to take the course. And they rented a house, and we lived with them a while. Later on, I moved to another place there. One place we moved to was a lady had a large house, but she had some little houses around it. She rented them out. I gave her $9 a week for room and board. And so it happened that I went to Orange with $9. All of them, they worked in the fields and got up enough money to give me to go down to Orange with $9.
$9 in your pocket?
Yeah. And then I started making close to 100 a week. Top scale was 138. That was top scale in the shipyard. Where it was in shipbuilding, layout, pre-assembly, or whatever, is 138.
So when did you leave the shipyards?
I left it in 1946 when we finished up. Just about all the ship was finished.
And what did you do after that?
Well, I went to work as a carpenter helper over in Jefferson Chemical, just the other side of Orange. And it so happened the superintendent over the carpenter was the same guy as my superintendent at Orange in the shipyard. Same guy, co-accident, I guess. I worked there at Jefferson Chemical for I was working there when Texas City blew up, 1947. After I left there, I went to Center and started working at Carthage in a paint and body shop. So then I wasn't making a whole lot of money. I was making $27 a week. A friend of mine was living in Galveston, and he said, we can go to work in Texas City painting for $1.87.5 an hour. I said, well, okay. I quit the body shop, and me and him went to Texas. Well, we moved to Galveston. His mother and father-in-law owned a big renting house. So we rented from them and started working in Texas City painting. From then on, I worked several different chemical plants like carbide is the last one I worked at. 35 years sandblasting paint. Quite a life we had. Worked in shipyard and all the different places I worked. It was a good life.
You made a fantastic contribution to your country.
Well, I hope so. They took 75 of us to Shreveport to take a physical for the Navy and Army. I just been to work at I was working in shipyard then, and I wanted them to call me for the Navy or Army, and they would call me. And one of the guys I was working said, well, if you quit, they'll call you. So I quit. So they called me, and I got to go through the plant manager, talk to him about it, and he said, yeah, why don't you just take a leave? You no use quitting. I said, no, ain't nothing wrong with me. I want to go to the Army or Navy, whatever. Well, okay. So I checked out. Sure enough, in about a week, I got my greetings, and they took us to Shreveport, 75 of us in a bus. Out of the 37, 75, they turned 37 down, sent them back. I was one of the 37. They told me I was colorblind. So I really didn't know what that meant then. I could tell one color from another, but some of them told me there was sort of a deficiency in the sight or something. So when I got back to the center, drove up to the house there, my mother, she was at home. She met me at the door and said, did you pass? I said, no, they turned me down. She said, thank the Lord. I said, yeah, you've been praying, hadn't you? Yeah, I have. So they turned you down. That's what I've been praying for. Well, I wasn't satisfied with it. I knew there was a little old recruiting station there in the center. And the next day I went up there and tried to join. Had me fill out a paper, and it asked on there, had you ever been tested for the service? And I had to put yes. He asked me about it, and I said, yeah, they had turned me down. I thought I might take a physical for the Army. I think they checked me for the Navy. He said, no, if they turned you down, nothing I can do. And I said, what was you doing? I said, well, I was working shipyard. He said, oh, go back down there and go to work. He said, you was doing much good there as you would in the Army. He said, we need them ships. I said, yes, what I'm going to do. So I went back down to the shipyard a couple of days later and had to go through the plant manager. And he recognized me, and there was 20,000 people working there then. He recognized me and said, yeah, I told you just take a leave, didn't I? I said, that's all right, just fill this out and go to work tomorrow. Okay, so that's what I did. Went back to work. So I worked there on to finished all the ships in 46.
So when you left, had they just shut everything down at the time you left, or they shut it down after you?
They began to shut it down.
Okay.
Because it was just finishing up. And when I finished up with the hull inspection department, and finished all the compartments that I was assigned to, that was all she wrote. It's sort of sad leaving because I knew all them guys I worked with. There was about 42 of them in the coordinators. I knew every one of them. And now I knew all of them that worked on the slab. I knew all of them. And then when I shipped it, I must have known about several thousand people by name and personally. Sort of sad when they began to lay everybody off. Of course, didn't need them no more. We done finished the ship. The war was over. That's the way it was. was.
Were you at work when it was announced that the war in Europe and then the war in Japan was over? Were you at work when that happened? VE Day and VJ Day.
I was working somewhere. I forget where it was I was working at that time. I remember it. I remember when they announced the D-Day battle that they was in when they invaded Europe. I was working shipyard then. Some experience.
As one of your future generations, I appreciate your work. I was a baby boomer. My dad served in the Second World War, and you guys are the reason that we're here.
Yeah, I guess we appreciated it. Never did say much about it. That's okay. We won the war. I was glad that I was able to help out.
We certainly were. And isn't it amazing that here this ship is 69 years old, going on 70. It's still here.
Yeah, that's amazing too.
It really is.
It is.
And we're counting down to the 70th anniversary of its launch and commissioning. And that time period will be the 70th anniversary of the end of World War II. It'll coincide with that.
It's interesting.
It really is. And that this ship was actually in service for all those years, from 45 until, I think, 98 when Turkey decommissioned it. It's a long time.
This ship had quite a history.
So we're going to try and highlight that history, share the legacy.
Yeah, it was in several wars.
It sure was. The Korean War, the Vietnam War, the first Gulf War with Turkey having it as its ship. Participated in a lot of action and activities, fired a lot of rounds.
Well, it's good to come back and walk on it again, take a look at it, and glad it's still here.
Well, I'm really glad that you came out and that you allowed me to video you, to capture the story. Nobody can tell it better than the person who was there.
Yeah, yes, that's right.